We often think of modern philosophy as this big rebellion against faith. But what if I told you that the whole thing actually kicked off as a deliberate attempt to put Christian belief on a solid, rational foundation? It's a surprising story, and we're going to dive right in.
So that's the big question, right? We kind of picture philosophy and faith in two totally separate corners, maybe even throwing punches. But the truth, especially when the modern era was just getting started, is so much more connected and honestly way more interesting than you'd think.
All right, so our story begins back in the 17th century with a name you've probably heard, René Descartes. His super famous work, Meditation on First Philosophy, wasn't just him sitting around thinking deep thoughts for fun. No, he had a very specific and surprisingly theological mission in mind. And Descartes lays it all out for us right there in the intro. He says he wants to prove God and the soul exist using pure natural reason. And why? Specifically to persuade infidels, unbelievers. See, he was worried that if you just said, the Bible says so, people would accuse Christians of circular reasoning, believing the Bible because of faith and believing in faith because of the Bible. He wanted to break that circle. And right here, we get to the heart of the tension. On one side, you have Descartes trying to build this magnificent fortress for faith using the bricks of human logic. But on the other side, the biblical perspective says, hang on a second, true faith is built on something else entirely, not our own cleverness, but on God's power. Now here's the truly fascinating part. Descartes himself admits that faith is a gift of God. He even says God can give the grace to make us believe he exists. I mean, he was so close. But he just didn't seem to follow that thought to its logical conclusion. If faith is a gift from an all-powerful God, why on earth would it need to be propped up by our limited human philosophy? And don't think this is just some dusty old 17th century debate. Not at all. This exact same way of thinking pops up today, even among people who are dedicated to defending the Christian faith. Take this quote from the well-known Christian apologist Norman Geisler. It sounds almost exactly like Descartes, doesn't it? He's basically saying you can't talk about what is real, like God existing, until you first figure out a solid method for how you know anything is real. You can't just start by assuming it's a fact. Now, Geisler used a couple of big philosophy words in there, so let's just break them down real quick. First up, ontology. It sounds complicated, but it's really just the study of being. It asks the question, what's actually real? Is God real? Are my thoughts real? That's all ontology. And the other word is epistemology. This is the study of knowledge. So it asks, okay, that thing might be real, but how can we actually know it's real? Geisler and Descartes both argue that epistemology, the how we know part, has to come before ontology, the what is real part. But what if that entire approach is just, backwards from a biblical point of view? The source material we're looking at here throws down a powerful counter-argument that basically flips the whole script. Just listen to the Apostle Paul here. He draws this incredibly sharp line in the sand. He says, look, my message didn't work because I had some killer arguments or because I was a great speaker. It worked because of a demonstration of the Spirit's power. Why? So that your faith wouldn't be based on human smarts, but on the raw power of God. And this isn't just a one-off comment. This idea is all over the Bible. Faith is described as the evidence itself. It's a light that God himself shines into our hearts. It's a gift. It's not something we construct with our reason. It's something we receive. So, all this leads to a really radical idea that directly challenges that clean separation of knowing and being that Descartes and Geisler were so insistent on. It's a total shift in how you look at the problem. And here it is, the big reveal. The biblical view doesn't separate these things, it ties them together. The answer to the epistemology question, how do we know, is found in the ontology. We can know God is real precisely because the real existing God is actively making himself known to us. Our ability to know is completely dependent on his being. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, that sounds like a clever excuse to dodge the tough questions. But the argument here is that this isn't some philosophical escape hatch. It's an idea that's woven deep into the fabric of the biblical texts themselves, sometimes in places you would never, ever expect to find it. So let's look at one of the most ordinary, inconspicuous places you can imagine, the simple greeting at the start of Paul's first letter to the church in Corinth. It looks like a standard hello, how are you? But if you look closer, this entire theological framework is packed right into it. So Paul's thanking God for these believers. Pretty standard stuff. But as you read this, ask yourself one simple question. Who is the one doing all the action in these sentences? The answer is, well, it's everything. Let's just run through the list. Who gives the grace? God does. Who enriches them with all knowledge? God does. Who confirms the message they heard? God does. Who will keep them firm until the end? God. And who calls them? Yep, God again. It's God, God, God all the way down. Their faith, their knowledge, their whole spiritual reality is presented as a direct result of God's action. Their knowing is a product of his being. And that leaves us with this final thought. From Descartes all the way to today, people have been searching for that airtight, rational proof for God. But if the Bible's account is true, if faith isn't something we build but something God gives, sustains, and confirms, what does that actually mean for that search? It kind of reframes the entire quest, doesn't it? It suggests the ultimate proof isn't found in a flawless argument, but in an encounter with the giver himself. It's a lot to think about.